one of the joys of being in private practice is that, to me, is the ability to create my own system. I don't know about you, but coming from nonprofit, coming from government work, the system is not set up for changes in our society and culture. There are things that are antiquated, things that don't make sense, things that are very oppressive. Now, building a private practice, that still exists. There is still a bigger system within our culture and our government that we're operating under. And we do have our licensure board. We do still have that system. But with private practice, we're able to circumvent some of the stuff that we didn't like about our other jobs. And I remember when I was going through spiritual direction, and this woman who was a priest was talking to me about, she was like, Kelly, think about, this comes from Phyllis Tillich. There's a rose, right? And there are people who are in that center of the rose. Hey, Carrie Ann, that are at the center of the rose, and they can affect change from inside. And then there's like, as the rose blooms, there's petals just barely hanging on. And I kind of see like private practice as those petals barely hanging on. Like we can tolerate, like we're trying to operate within at least, our ethical codes, our board's designation if we want to keep our license. But beyond that, we get to innovate and iterate our practices. But what can happen is if we haven't really explored the root of what we've learned about business, which has often come from our past experiences in other organizations, we will replicate the same things that are oppressive. And here's what I see being replicated. A lot of therapists are out there feeling broken. There's something wrong with me. I don't get my notes done. There's something wrong with me. I don't call every phone call back. I can't do this. I'm broken. I've heard it a lot. Now, what happens is that when you work in an agency, the agency says, I expect 100% compliance with documentation, or you have to have an 80% productivity rate, which means billable hours. But we're going to give you 120 cases. It's unreasonable. And yet, you as the clinician respond to that system, trying to contort yourself. I call it being Gumby, but maybe that ages me by saying Gumby. But like that character that moves around like a posable, like you can has wires in it and you can move it all around. Maybe I'm being ridiculous here. But we think that there's something wrong with us, that we can't make the quota. And then we start to realize, wait, this quota is ridiculous. But then the system says, try harder, try and make it work. And so we try and make it work. But the expectation is not in service of any, of really the clients anymore. It's in service of a grant. It's in service of the third party who's reimbursing. And so we are operating to keep this system going. And I used to tell my staff when I worked at the county, if you work overtime, you're telling like leadership that it's okay that these expectations are unrealistic and that you will do whatever you can to meet them. It's a hard place to be, right? Because you don't want to lose your job either, but also the expectations are unrealistic. And then when we start a business, how many of us have expectations that are really harsh